The grand meeting chamber of the Allied Species Council had never felt so cold. The massive holographic display in the center of the room showed countless red dots spreading across their territory like a disease, each one representing another world lost to the swarm. Admiral Stone of the Council forces stood rigid, his crystalline body reflecting the dim light, as he delivered the news no one wanted to hear. We have lost the outer ring completely. The swarm adapts to our tactics faster than our best AI can generate new ones. Around the circular table, representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations sat in silence. The tree-like people's ambassadors' leaves had turned brown with stress. The silicon beings' neural networks pulsed with worry patterns. Even the energy clouds flickered with uncertainty. Our technology is superior, spoke the head counselor, his metallic scales shifting nervously. How do they keep defeating us? A younger officer, Commander Reed, stepped forward. His transparent form trembled slightly as he spoke. The swarm's adaptation rate has increased by 200% in the last month alone. They learn from every battle. Our perfect formations, our calculated strikes. They study them and find the flaws faster than we can improve them. The room erupted in worried whispers. The Allied Species Council represented the peak of galactic civilization. Their ships could bend space. Their computers could predict the future. Their weapons could reshape matter itself. Yet here they were, losing to an enemy that seemed unstoppable. There might be one option left, said Commander Reed, his voice barely audible. The head counselor's eyes narrowed. Speak. There's a species we've been watching. We've kept them isolated because they seemed too unpredictable, too chaotic for our society. Reed's form solidified, gaining confidence. They're called humans. The chamber filled with shocked murmurs. Everyone knew about the humans, the species that still fought with physical weapons when they had space travel, the ones who made art about war instead of trying to prevent it, the race that seemed to thrive on chaos instead of order. Impossible, shouted one of the council members. They're barely past their first space age. They still use explosive weapons. They fight among themselves. Commander Reed activated a small hologram showing Earth. That's exactly why we need them. The swarm beats us because they can predict our logical moves. But humans, he zoomed in on a human sports game, showing two teams playing something called football, where players moved in seemingly random patterns yet somehow worked together perfectly. Humans are different, Reed continued. They use strategies that make no sense, yet they work. They practice war as both a science and an art. They write thousands of stories about fighting impossible enemies and winning. Admiral Stone stepped forward again. Council members, I've studied their military history. They have a concept called thinking outside the box, deliberately choosing actions that seem illogical to confuse their enemies. The swarm's prediction algorithms might not be able to handle that. The head counselor raised his hand for silence. You're suggesting we ask a primitive species to help us fight an enemy that has defeated our most advanced technology. Yes, Reed replied firmly, because what we see as primitive might be exactly what we need. The humans have something we lost long ago in our pursuit of perfection. The ability to embrace chaos and make it work for them. The council chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of desperate hope. The head counselor looked at the hologram of Earth one more time, watching as humans went about their daily lives, unaware that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were about to ask for their help. Prepare a diplomatic team, he finally ordered. If we're going to do something this crazy, we might as well do it right. As the council members filed out, Commander Reed allowed himself a small smile. The allied species were about to learn that sometimes the best way to fight an impossible enemy was to do the impossible thing. Ask for help from those you thought were beneath you. The United Nations Emergency Council wasn't supposed to meet at midnight, but when 5 alien ships appeared over New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, and New Delhi at the same time, old rules didn't matter anymore. General Thompson stared at the alien delegation across the table in the underground bunker. They looked nothing like what movies had predicted. One was made of shifting crystal, another looked like pure energy in a containment suit, and the third seemed to be a living tree. Their translator devices hummed softly in the tense air. "Let me understand this correctly," Thompson said, rubbing his tired eyes. "You're the most advanced species in the galaxy. You have ships that can bend space, weapons that can reshape matter, AIs that can predict the future. And you're losing a war." The crystal alien, who had introduced himself as Admiral Stone, nodded. "The swarm adapts too quickly. Our perfect strategies fail because they learn to counter them instantly. And you want our help." Thompson couldn't hide his disbelief. "Why? According to your own words, we're, what was it? Primitive and unpredictable." The tree-like alien's leaves rustled. "That's exactly why we need you. Show them the battle footage, Admiral." A hologram appeared in the middle of the room, showing a massive space battle. The human military officers watched as perfectly organized alien ships moved in beautiful formations, firing weapons that looked like they came from science fiction. But the enemy, a mass of biomechanical ships that moved like a swarm of insects, kept adapting and countering every move. General Thompson raised his hand. "Stop the recording. Play it back from the 30-second mark, but slower." The aliens looked confused but complied. Thompson stood up and walked to the hologram. "There," he pointed, "and there, and there again. Your ships move in perfect patterns. Too perfect. The enemy isn't really adapting. They're reading your playbook because you're being too predictable. The energy being pulsed brightly. But our formations are mathematically perfect. Our targeting systems are precise to the quantum level." "That's the problem," said Colonel Rivera, who had been quiet until now. "You're fighting like machines. Perfect, predictable machines." She stood up and grabbed a pad of paper, something that made the alien stare in surprise. Using a simple pen, she drew a quick diagram. "Look at how ancient human armies fought," she continued. "The Romans didn't just march in straight lines. They feinted, they retreated to draw enemies into traps. They used terrain and weather. They used controlled chaos." Chaos. The crystal alien surface rippled with confusion. "How can chaos be controlled?" Thompson smiled. "That's what humans do best. We take chaos, and we make it work for us. In fact," he turned to his aide, "bring up footage of the Battle of Midway, the Gulf War's left hook maneuver, and some modern drone swarm exercises." For the next hour, the aliens watched in fascination as the humans showed them warfare that broke all their rules of logic. Ships that sailed into typhoons to surprise their enemies. Armies that attacked through impassable deserts. Fighters that deliberately flew imperfectly to confuse enemy targeting systems. "Your enemy uses biological ships, right?" Thompson asked. "They think like a hive, like insects. And what's the one thing insects can't handle? Unpredictability. Change. Chaos." Admiral Stone's crystalline form seemed to brighten. "You're suggesting we should fight imperfectly, on purpose. We're suggesting you should fight smart, not just perfect," Colonel Rivera corrected. "And we can teach you how. But first, we need to see everything you have on the swarm. Every battle, every encounter, every piece of intel." The aliens looked at each other, then back at the humans who were already pulling out notebooks and tablets, ready to start work. "One more thing," Thompson added with a slight smile. "Next time you make first contact with the species, try not appearing over their major cities without warning. We nearly launched our missiles before your message came through." The aliens' translator devices made an odd sound, perhaps their version of nervous laughter. They were starting to realize that working with humans would be very different from anything they had ever done before. The alien command ship's main study room had never seen anything quite like this before. Where there should have been holographic displays and quantum computers, There were now paper books, printed maps, and hand-drawn diagrams scattered across every surface. General Thompson stood before the gathered alien commanders, holding up an ancient worn book. "This," he said, "is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's over 2,000 years old, and it's still relevant today." The alien commanders looked at each other in confusion. Admiral Stone's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. "You want us to study ancient paper texts when we have predictive AI and quantum targeting systems?" "Exactly," Thompson smiled, putting the book down and picking up a marker. He walked to a whiteboard, another primitive tool that had made the aliens nervous. "Your fancy computers are part of the problem. They think too perfectly. The swarm beats them because they're predictable." He drew a simple diagram showing two armies facing each other. "Sun Tzu said, 'All warfare is based on deception. When your enemy thinks you'll go right, you go left. When they think you're weak, you're strong. When they think you're retreating, you're actually setting a trap.'" One of the energy-being commanders pulsed brightly. "But that makes no sense. If we appear weak, the enemy will attack us." "Exactly." Colonel Rivera stepped forward, grabbing another marker. "That's what we want them to do. Look at this battle footage from your last engagement." A hologram showed the swarm overwhelming another perfect alien formation. Rivera paused it and drew over the hologram with her marker, something that made several alien officers wince. "See how they committed all their forces when they thought they had you beaten? What if, instead of trying to maintain perfect formation, you had broken apart on purpose, made them think they'd won, then hit them from multiple directions?" The tree-like alien commander's leaves rustled thoughtfully, like a trap. "But our battle computers say breaking formation reduces combat effectiveness by 47%. "Turn them off," Thompson said firmly. "Just for one practice run. Let's show you how controlled chaos works." The next few hours were spent in the practice simulator. The alien commanders struggled at first, their ingrained need for perfect order fighting against every human suggestion. But slowly they began to understand. They learned about false retreats, about baiting the enemy, about appearing weak where you were strong. They studied human military history, not just the tactics, but the creativity, the desperate gambles that paid off, the unexpected solutions that won impossible battles. "There was a human battle," Thompson explained as they watched their first successful simulation, where one side was trapped against the ocean by a much larger army. "You know what the commander did? He burned his own ships, told his men there was no retreat possible. They had to win or die. They fought so fiercely they won against impossible odds." The alien commanders sat in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Stone spoke. That's madness. Destroying your own escape route." "Sometimes," Rivera smiled, "madness is exactly what you need. The swarm thinks like a machine, predicting your logical moves. But humans, we've spent our entire history learning to be unpredictable, to think outside the box, to do the impossible because we don't know it's impossible." A young alien officer raised his appendage. I think I understand. In the simulation, when I pretended my ships were damaged and retreated, the swarm followed exactly as you predicted. They thought they were being logical, but they were really being predictable." "Now you're getting it," Thompson grinned. "Tomorrow, we'll study guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, and my personal favorite, the art of making the enemy think you're about to do something incredibly stupid, right up until the moment they realize they're the ones who made a mistake." As the alien commanders filed out of the room, many still shaking their heads at the strange human ideas, Admiral Stone stayed behind. He looked at the books, the maps, the hand-drawn diagrams. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we became too perfect for our own good. We forgot that sometimes the best move isn't the most logical one." Thompson patted the alien's crystalline shoulder, a gesture that surprised them both. "Don't worry, Admiral. will help you remember how to be just imperfect enough to win this war. The massive command bridge of the Allied fleet's flagship hummed with nervous energy. This was the first real battle using human tactics, and nobody knew if it would work. Admiral Stone's crystalline form sparkled with anxiety as he watched the enemy approach on the main screen. "Swarm fleet detected," announced one of the alien officers. "Their numbers are larger than expected. At least 3,000 ships." General Thompson stood calmly at the tactical display, drinking coffee from a paper cup that had made several alien officers stare in disbelief. "Perfect," he said with a smile. "The bigger their fleet, the harder they'll fall for this." The plan was unlike anything the Allied species had ever tried before. Instead of their usual perfect formation, the fleet was scattered in what looked like complete disorder. Some ships appeared to have engine troubles. Others were flying in ways that made the alien tactical computers scream warnings. "Sir," one of the tree-like officers reported, "the swarm is adapting their formation. They think we're having technical problems." Thompson's smile grew wider. "Of course they do. Our ships are flying like they're damaged. Our formation looks broken, and their logic says we're easy prey. Colonel Rivera, is your group in position?" "Ready and waiting." Rivera's voice came through the comm. Her ships were hidden behind a nearby moon, their engines cold, waiting for the perfect moment. The swarm fleet moved closer, spreading out to surround what they thought was a weakened enemy. Their biomechanical ships moved with perfect efficiency, exactly as predicted. "They're launching their first wave," announced the tactical officer. "Standard attack pattern, just as the simulation showed." "Now comes the fun part," Thompson said, finishing his coffee. "Admiral Stone, give the signal." What happened next would be studied in military academies, both human and alien, for years to come. The seemingly broken Allied fleet suddenly moved with purpose, but not in the way the swarm expected. Instead of forming up into a defensive position, each ship began flying in its own unique pattern. Some spun while firing, making themselves harder to hit. Others flew straight at the enemy, then changed direction at the last second. A group of smaller ships started flying in circles, creating a confusing target for the swarm's targeting systems. "This is madness," exclaimed one of the alien officers, watching the chaos unfold. "This is human warfare," Thompson corrected. "Look at the swarm's response." The enemy fleet was struggling. Their adaptive algorithms couldn't find a pattern to counter because there was no pattern. Each Allied ship was fighting differently, using tactics that changed randomly. "Now, Colonel," Thompson ordered. Rivera's hidden fleet suddenly powered up and attacked from behind, catching the swarm completely by surprise. Her ships flew through the enemy formation like a knife, breaking their perfect structure. "Impossible," the tactical officer shouted. "The swarm, they're confused. Their ships are attacking each other, trying to adapt to too many different strategies at once." The battle turned into something that looked more like a street fight than a space battle. Allied ships ducked and weaved, never staying still, never becoming predictable. The swarm, used to fighting against logical opponents, found their greatest strength turned against them. Their ability to adapt quickly became a weakness as they tried to counter thousands of different tactics simultaneously. "Their command ship is retreating," Admiral Stone announced, his crystal form glowing brightly with excitement. We've never seen them retreat before." The bridge erupted in cheers as the remaining swarm ships broke formation and fled. Out of the 3,000 enemy ships that had started the battle, barely 500 escaped. Thompson looked at the celebration around him with satisfaction. "And that, Admiral, is why sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all." "I think I understand now," Stone said quietly. "We've been fighting like machines, thinking that perfect logic was the answer. But the swarm can counter perfect logic." "Exactly," Thompson nodded. "They can't counter human unpredictability because even we don't know exactly what we're going to do next. Sometimes, the best way to win is to embrace the chaos." As the Allied fleet regrouped, repair crews already heading out to fix the battle damage. One thing was clear. The war had changed. For the first time, the swarm had not just been defeated. They had been outplayed. And this was just the beginning. The Allied Species Training Center had never been so noisy. Where once silent, perfect formations of ships practiced precise maneuvers, now there was beautiful disorder. Human instructors worked with alien crews, teaching them something that went against everything they believed in: how to be imperfect on purpose. No, no, Colonel Rivera shouted into her comm unit. You're still flying too perfectly. Your turns are too exact. Throw in some wobble. Make it look natural. The alien ship in front of her viewing screen tried to adjust, its crystalline hull sparkling as it attempted a less-than-perfect turn. The pilot, a being made of pure energy, was clearly struggling with the concept. I don't understand, the alien pilot said. My navigation computer says this is reducing our efficiency by 30%. That's exactly what we want, Rivera explained patiently. Remember the last battle. The swarm expects perfection. They plan for it. They can't handle real, natural movement. Across the training field, General Thompson watched another group of alien ships practicing drunk walking, a flight pattern that looked random but actually followed hidden rules. The alien commanders had been horrified when he first suggested it, but after seeing it work against the swarm, they were eager to learn. It goes against everything we know, Admiral Stone said, floating next to Thompson. Our species spent thousands of years perfecting space combat, and now we're learning to fight like living beings instead of computers, Thompson finished with a smile. That's exactly why it works. The swarm adapted to fight perfect opponents. They never learned to handle chaos. A tree-like alien officer approached them, holding a tablet computer. General, I think I found something interesting in the old battle records. Before we became so advanced, our species used to fight more like humans. We were messier. Really? Thompson took the tablet, interested. Show me. The records showed ancient alien battles, fought before they developed their advanced technology. Their ships had flown in ways that looked almost human, taking risks, using terrain, fighting with instinct instead of pure logic. We forgot. The tree-like officer said softly, leaves drooping slightly. We became so focused on advancement that we forgot our origins. We thought becoming perfect was the goal. In another part of the training center, a young human instructor was teaching alien crews about something they found completely foreign: improvisation. Sometimes your plans will fail, she explained to the confused aliens. When that happens, don't freeze up waiting for new orders. Think on your feet. Adapt. Use what's around you. But how do we plan for unplanned situations? Asked a crystalline officer, their form flickering with confusion. That's the point. You don't. You practice being unpredictable until it becomes natural. Watch this. She activated a simulator, showing a space battle where a human ship, badly damaged, used its own debris as a weapon, confusing the swarm's targeting systems long enough to escape. See, they expected the damaged ship to either retreat in a straight line or continue fighting normally. They didn't expect it to use its damage creatively. Slowly, through many frustrating hours of practice, the alien crews began to understand. They learned to trust their instincts alongside their computers. They discovered that perfection wasn't always the answer. By the end of the training day, the difference was clear. The Allied fleet no longer moved like a perfect machine. Instead, it flowed like water, each ship adding its own small bit of controlled chaos to the whole. Admiral Stone watched the final practice run with amazement. It's beautiful, he admitted. Not perfect, but beautiful. Like a dance where everyone knows the basic steps but adds their own style. That's exactly what it is, Thompson agreed. A dance of chaos that only looks like chaos to our enemies. To us, it's a new kind of order. As the ships landed for the day, Rivera joined them, looking tired but satisfied. "They're getting it," she said. "Slowly but surely, they're learning to think outside their perfect boxes." "And just in time," Thompson added, looking at a recent intelligence report. "Because the swarm is gathering their biggest fleet yet, they think they've figured out our new tactics." Stone's crystalline form brightened with what humans had learned was his version of a smile. "They're in for a surprise. Because this time, we're not just fighting with human tactics." "No," Thompson agreed. "We're fighting with human creativity. And that's something they can never predict." The command center of the Allied fleet was dead quiet as they watched the massive swarm fleet approach. Over 5,000 enemy ships moved as one dark cloud across space, heading straight for the heart of Allied territory, the Centauri star cluster, home to billions of civilians. "They think this will be their final victory," Admiral Stone said, his crystalline form dulled with concern. "Their biggest fleet ever." General Thompson stood at the main tactical display, his face calm despite the odds. "No, Admiral. This will be their biggest defeat." He turned to face the gathered commanders, human and alien alike. "Everyone knows the plan." The commanders nodded. After months of training, after countless simulations and practice runs, they were ready. Ready to try something so crazy that even the humans had been surprised when it was first suggested. "Message from the enemy," a communication officer announced. "They're demanding our surrender." Thompson smiled. "Send them our response." Across space, the Allied fleet waited, but not in the perfect defensive formation the swarm expected. Instead, it looked like complete chaos. Some ships drifted seemingly dead in space. Others flew in random patterns. A few appeared to be having engine troubles, spinning slowly. "They're scanning us," reported a tree-like tactical officer, leaves trembling with excitement. "Their algorithms show confusion. They expected our standard defense pattern." The massive swarm fleet moved closer, spreading out to surround what they thought was a disorganized, broken enemy. Their biomechanical ships pulsed with confidence, their hive minds certain of victory. "Wait for it," Thompson said quietly. "Let them think they've got us." The first wave of swarm ships launched their attack. They flew straight into what looked like gaps in the Allied formation, expecting easy kills. "Now," Thompson ordered. What happened next would be remembered as one of the greatest military maneuvers in galactic history. The seemingly dead ships suddenly came to life. The random movements turned into coordinated attacks. Every ship in the Allied fleet began fighting in its own unique way, creating a beautiful dance of controlled chaos. Second phase. Colonel Rivera's voice came through the comm. She led a group of ships that seemed to be retreating in panic. The swarm, following their logical programming, sent ships to chase what looked like easy prey. Instead, they found themselves drawn into a complex trap. Rivera's ships split apart, each one leading their pursuers into carefully planned killing zones. "They're trying to adapt," shouted an alien officer. "Their ships. They're changing tactics." "Too late," Thompson grinned. "Hit them with everything. Every crazy idea we practiced. Every illogical move." The battle exploded into wonderful disorder. Human ships performed maneuvers that made their alien allies' computers scream warnings. Alien ships, finally freed from the need to be perfect, fought with a creativity they hadn't shown in thousands of years. A group of crystalline ships spun while firing, creating a dazzling light show that confused the swarm's targeting systems. Tree-like commanders used their natural understanding of growth patterns to create evolving attack formations. Energy beings pulsed their ships' power in ways that made them seem to flicker in and out of existence. And through it all, human ships led the charge, showing that sometimes the best move was the one that made absolutely no sense to logical minds. "Their command ship is in chaos," reported the tactical officer. "The swarm, they're actually panicking. Their adaptive algorithms are overloading trying to predict our movements." Admiral Stone watched in amazement as the supposedly invincible swarm fleet began to break apart. They can't adapt because there's no pattern to adapt to, he realized. Every ship is fighting differently. Exactly, Thompson said proudly. You can't predict chaos. You can only learn to dance with it. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The swarm, faced with an enemy they couldn't predict or understand, fell into disarray. Their perfect formations broke down. Their adaptive algorithms, trying to counter thousands of different tactics at once, began to fail. As the remaining sworn ships retreated in disorder, leaving behind the wreckage of their once mighty fleet, Admiral Stone turned to Thompson. "We did it," he said simply. "We actually did it." Thompson nodded, watching the Allied ships regrouping, each one having fought its own unique battle as part of the greater whole. "No, Admiral. We just remembered how to be alive instead of perfect." And that made all the difference. The Great Hall of the Allied Species Council looked very different now. Where once everything had been arranged in perfect order, now there was a comfortable mix of styles. Alien and human decorations stood side by side. Even the seating had changed. The perfect circle of chairs had been rearranged into a more natural gathering space. 3 months had passed since the great battle that broke the swarm. Reports came in daily of more enemy fleets retreating, their adaptive algorithms unable to cope with the new way of war that humans had taught the Allied species. General Thompson stood before the council, completing his final report. Behind him, a hologram showed the remains of the last major swarm fleet, now drifting powerless in deep space. "The enemy is not just defeated," he explained. "They're completely lost. Their entire strategy depended on predicting and countering our moves. Now that we're unpredictable, their greatest strength has become their greatest weakness." Admiral Stone, newly appointed as head of Allied defense, nodded in agreement. His crystalline form now purposely included small imperfections, a reminder of the lessons learned. "The swarm's remaining forces are scattered," Stone added. "Without their ability to adapt to our tactics, they'd lost their hive mind advantage. They're just machines now, trying to fight against living, thinking beings." A tree-like council member raised a branch thoughtfully. "We owe humanity more than just our thanks for military victory. They helped us remember something we had forgotten in our pursuit of advancement." Colonel Rivera, standing next to Thompson, smiled. "You didn't really forget. You just got too focused on being perfect. Sometimes the best solutions aren't perfect. They're human." The head counselor stood, his metallic scales shifting in what humans now recognized as a sign of deep emotion. "We invited humans to teach us how to fight. Instead, you taught us how to live again. Our civilizations have become like machines, predictable, logical, perfect. And in that perfection, we lost something vital." Screens around the hall showed images from across Allied space. Ships now flew with individual style instead of in perfect formation. Cities that had been built in precise geometric patterns were being rebuilt with artistic flair. Even the energy beings had started experimenting with new ways to express themselves. "The swarm couldn't beat us once we remembered how to be unpredictable," Thompson said. "But more importantly, you all remembered how to be yourselves. Every species has its own kind of chaos, its own way of being imperfect. That's not a weakness. It's the greatest strength any living thing can have." Admiral Stone activated another hologram, showing training centers where humans and aliens work together, learning from each other. "We're establishing permanent exchange programs. Humans will continue to teach us their illogical ways, and we'll share our technology with Earth. Together, we'll be stronger than either of us could be alone." The head counselor raised his hands for attention. "There's one more thing. The council has made a decision. We're changing our name. From now on, we won't be the Allied Species Council. We will be the United Living Peoples, to remind us always that being alive means being unpredictable, imperfect, and wonderful." The hall erupted in cheers, another change from the formal applause of the past. As the celebration continued, Thompson turned to Rivera. "Think they'll be okay now?" he asked quietly. Rivera watched as a group of young alien officers excitedly discussed plans for modifying their ships with what they called style upgrades, completely unnecessary, but personally meaningful changes. Yeah, she smiled. They'll be more than okay. They've learned the most important lesson of all, which is that perfection is boring. Life is chaos, and chaos is beautiful. As if to prove her point, a small aircraft zoomed past the hull's windows, performing completely unnecessary but impressive aerial maneuvers. Its pilot, a young crystal being, was obviously showing off, something that would have been unthinkable just months ago. The war was over. The swarm was defeated. But more importantly, an entire civilization had remembered how to truly live. And it all started because they had been desperate enough to ask for help from a species they thought was primitive, only to learn that being primitive sometimes meant being more alive than anyone else. The galaxy would never be the same. It would be better. It would be more chaotic, more colorful, more alive. It would be more human.